first thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to stretch the strings. So to do this, a tuner here, I'm just going to put it on my headstock. That's an E. Why do we have to stretch the strings? Mostly we have to stretch the strings because down here around the tuning peg, there is a little bit of slack there. When we stretch the strings, we're really tightening up that, and we're getting rid of any extra slack down there. That's mostly what we're doing. Does the string itself stretch a little bit? Yeah, but mostly that's what we're doing. So to stretch a string, the way I do it, I put my left hand here, I put my right hand here, and I gently pull up on it. And I move it down. Just like that. Now, why am I holding the string down? Because otherwise I'm going to pull it out of the slot here. And I don't want to do that. I want to leave it right in that nut slot. So now, it went down a whole step. I'm going to tune it back up to E again, and I'm going to stretch it a second time. Now it went down a half step. Going to tune it up. Third time. Third time is the charm. So now we move on to the next one. And this should be an A. So usually, again, for each string, I'll just go through it like 3 times and stretch it. And each time after I stretch it, I'll tune it back up to pitch. Oops, wrong string. You get pretty quick. You get pretty quick at this after a while. Yeah, get a pick. So now our guitar is in tune. When you get a guitar, you usually get a small collection of hex wrenches. So with this guitar, I've got a Vibrato Bar, right, which goes in that hole right there. And I've actually got 3 hex wrenches. Now, what are these 3 hex wrenches? Well, the biggest one is always going to be the truss rod. So the truss rod is right here. Okay? There's a metal rod that's underneath the fretboard, inside the neck, that goes from here and it terminates right about here. And the job of this rod is to tighten or to loosen, because if your neck is not straight, you can use the truss rod to kind of straighten it. Do you want your neck to be perfectly 100% straight? Most people would say no. Most people would say, instead of being perfectly straight, what you actually want is a teeny, tiny little bit of dip or relief in the center. If you have too much relief in the center, then the neck it's kind of like that shape, and then it's going to be a mess. If you've got a bump in the center where the neck is like this, so this part of the neck is bent that way a little bit, and so is this, then that is also bad because the strings will hit the frets, right? You want it perfectly straight, and then you want a little bit of relief in the center. How much relief? 10/1000ths of an inch is sort of like the ballpark standard. So that's what the truss rod is. Oh, how do they put the truss rod in on this guitar? I'm glad you asked. They route into the wood right here. They route a channel, they stick the metal rod in there, and then they fill that route with a different colored piece of wood. That's how they do it in this particular guitar. And now I'm going to check the neck relief. So to determine if the neck is straight, what do? Well, we're going to put a capo around here in front of the first fret, and then we're going to press down on the last fret with our finger. And then what we're going to do is at the 8th fret, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, this fret right here, we're going to measure the distance between the bottom of the string and the top of the fret. And we're going to measure that distance with a feeler gauge. Feeler gauges come to us from the automotive world, where they have to measure extremely small distances. And they do that with these different pieces of metal that are different thicknesses. This guy right here is 10/1000ths of an inch thick. So I'm going to put this in the playing position, as if I was going to play it. 3, 5, 7, 8. Here's the fret. Right here, this guy right here. I'm going to push down on this fret. And what I want is I want this feeler gauge, when I put it in here, I want it to be touching the fret, and I want it to be just barely touching the string. Just barely touching it. If when I put this feeler gauge in, if it pushes the string upward, then the distance is too small. I want that string to not really barely move at all, but I want to be able to feel it. Now, I will tell you honestly, this is a bit tricky. Okay, and the other thing I will tell you is that there's a little bit too much relief here. This neck could afford to be a little more straight. So what that means is I'm going to tighten the neck. Now remember what we said, righty-tighty. A lot of people are afraid to adjust their truss rod because they've heard stories about truss rods cracking. Well, if you only do this a quarter turn at a time and you're not working on an instrument from the 50s, you're going to be fine. So righty-tighty, I'm going to tighten it up this way. Let me loosen this string here just a little bit. This D string. We'll loosen it. And that much. That was not quite a quarter turn. Believe it or not, I actually tightened it up too much. I'm going to loosen it up a teeny bit. A little bit. There. Yep. So that means this neck is straight, but right around the 8th fret, it's a 10,000th of an inch, a little bit, the strings are a little bit further away. And the reason you want that is, as the strings vibrate, they've got just a little bit more room to vibrate. Cool. So the trem setup. Take the back plate off. So what we have here is 3 springs. We've got this trem block here, which is super small and skinny. We've got the 3 springs, and then we've got the claw. Now, if you look at this guitar, you can see that this trem is, well, pretty much decked. Like, I can't push down here any further. These springs are tightened up very, very far. This is very tight. If I put the bar in right now and I pull up on it, there's no place to go. I can push down on it, but I can't pull up on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to float this, what's called floating. Now, a floating trem is where you can pull up on the bar and the strings go up in pitch, or push down on the bar and they go down. If we want to float the bar and be able to go up and down, how exactly do we do that? Well, it's super, super simple. We do it by loosening the springs. So, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, I'm going to turn these screws to the left a bit. See, I'm loosening. And then over here, I'm loosening the screw, loosening. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. With this much play in the tailpiece, if I tune this guitar up, I'm going to be tuning it forever. Because as I tune it, this tailpiece is going to move. And I'm going to tune it, and it's going to move. And I'm going to tune it, and it's going to move. It's going to take for freaking ever. So, what I'm actually going to do to set this up, to prevent this tailpiece from moving, what I want to do is I want to put something in here that's going to prevent the trem from moving as I tighten up the strings. So, one trick that I've done in the past is take a stack of pennies and tape them together until you get the exact right thickness that you want to put in here. So why am I physically putting something in here? Well, because as I tighten the strings, this tailpiece is going to go that way. And I want to stop it from going that way so that I can tune. So I'm actually putting my capo in here. And believe it or not, this will work. Rough tuning. So I got it in tune. Well, roughly. So rough tuned. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten these screws here. I'm going to tighten these screws until this falls out. And then I'll have this guitar roughly about where I want it. So I'm just going to tighten them up just a little bit. Tighten the screw, tighten it. Hey, there we go. Okay, so just to review, stack of pennies is better. You put it in here, right? And then you tighten these screws until it falls out. And now I've got this floating a little bit. Hear that? Just a little bit. If I wanted to float it more, then basically I would loosen these even further. So the tighter these springs are, the closer this bridge is to the wood. And the closer it is to the wood, the less you can go up. So I've got it set to just go up a little bit, which is kind of how I like it. Okay?